The polls are close, but that doesn't necessarily mean the results will be, will it?
No, that's right. Especially with every state has different procedures for mail-in ballots, absentee ballots, early voting. I think there's no easy way to tell how quickly we'll get results, and it all depends on the margin. If the margin were large, the results would be clear early and projections would be made. But I'm not sure that's in store for us. At least there's no evidence that it is.
How would you define this election? There seems to be a chasm between college-educated women swinging to the Democrats and men without college degrees swinging to the Republicans. Do you think that we could say this election is defined by gender and class?
I think there's no question that the gender gap is much larger than it has been before. It has been quite large before, especially when Donald Trump himself is. Perhaps everyone will remember in 2016, the Access Hollywood tape was very polarizing. I think the issue in this election is more centered around the legal issue of abortion rights, where Donald Trump appointed 3 Supreme Court justices that then in turn rolled back Roe v. Wade and really changed the landscape of abortion rights in America. I think that has been a really powerful one, and along with some other improvident and perhaps unfortunate remarks by J.D. Vance, the vice presidential candidate, and Donald Trump himself.
Looking back, though, in 2020, Trump falsely declared victory just after 2 a.m. I think there's a lot of concern that we might see something like that happen again in the early hours of tomorrow morning. You know, there's been a lot of doubt sowed among Trump supporters about election integrity. The whole city in Washington, D.C. is starting to kind of get itself on lockdown. Are we likely to see a volatile couple of days ahead, do you think?
So here are a few things to know. One, again, it depends entirely on the results. So we have to assume, to think about, that maybe Donald Trump would look like he was losing or be declared the loser. There is no chance that Vice President Harris would challenge results. There's no foreseeable chance that that's happening. The second thing to say is if Donald Trump were projected to or expected or anticipated to lose, this time around, actually an awful lot of election officials and election offices, including in my home state of Pennsylvania, they are not going to be caught sleeping on this issue. They are much more prepared and fortified for whatever might happen. Things happen in 2020 and they never would believe. In 2024, they believe it. And they are prepared and they have systems in place that I think are vastly more secure for the personnel than they were before. And then the third thing is that, of course, in 2020, Donald Trump was the president of the United States and actually had a lot of access to power and authority that he does not have now as a former president. And so I think there are reasons, at least in this area, of course, it is likely that Donald Trump himself will continue to insist that he's won. He hasn't given up 4 years later, despite all evidence to the contrary. But I think his ability to actually make trouble this time around, I think it's quite a lot lower if one's allowed to be optimistic about anything.
Let's talk about the battle for the House majority. It seems to be shaping up to be one of the tightest contests in recent memory. Why is that? And can you tell us a little bit about, you know, the outcome of the House and Senate and how that might affect the winning president, given that we have an international audience who might not fully understand that?
Sure. So let me start actually with the Senate. So the Senate has 2 senators for every state, and right now the Senate is extremely, extremely close. And I think that probably most people believe and anticipate that although right now the Democrats have control of the Senate through the vice president's voting, probably they will not control the Senate after this election, probably not. The House of Representatives is not state by state, but actually each particular district, like very small areas inside states. And I think that there, probably most people think that the Republicans may very well at least battle hard for the House if they don't actually win the House. They control the House right now. And I think the main factors in the House race and maybe also in the Senate race are the current president, Joe Biden, is not extremely popular. And even though economic data and even though crime data and even though immigration data and even inflation data are all ticking upward as the election approaches, the administration remains quite unpopular in some of those areas. And so I think there is a dissatisfaction maybe among areas of the American public. And I think that there's a likelihood of Republican victories in either the Senate or the House, even if Vice President Harris wins the presidency, because I think there on Harris versus Trump, there's a different personal dynamic as opposed to the party versus party dynamic that I think will probably play out in the legislature, in both the House and the Senate.
All right, great to get your analysis. Craig Green, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.